Hey, this is Warren Redlick with a quick update on Starlink. Elon Musk spoke yesterday at an Air Force event.
The satellite ended up having the same capability.
If you're not familiar with Starlink, Starlink is a satellite network that is planned by SpaceX and approved by the FCC. It will be a network of initially up to 12,000 satellites, each with 20 gigabits per second of bandwidth, up to a potential of 42,000 so far satellites planned in 2 orbital shells, traveling around the Earth and giving essentially full-time access to anyone anywhere on the Earth to the internet at high speed with low latency. Low latency means when you request something from the internet, it responds quicker. One of the problems with existing satellite networks is the satellites are very far away from Earth in a higher orbit, so it takes longer for the signal to travel to that satellite and back, and that additional time makes the internet feel slower. So the SpaceX satellites will be much closer to Earth, and so the satellite signals will not have to travel as far. They will be over the ocean, so people on boats will be able to use them. They will be accessible by airplanes, and that's already been tested on Air Force planes, that it will work with airplanes. Pretty much anywhere you are on most of the Earth, maybe not the North Pole or South Pole, too really far north or really far south, but for most of the Earth, most places you will have full, high-speed, low-latency internet all of the time. With 10,000 satellites, if each one of them serves 100 people, that serves 1 million people. If each one of them is able to serve 1,000 people, that's 10 million people. And I think that as the time goes on, that technology is going to improve. The ability to allocate the bandwidth to different users at different moments is going to make this more possible, and you're going to see even more than 1,000 users on average per satellite. Keep in mind, when a satellite's over the ocean, there won't be that many users in range of it, so this may not be perfect, but the average user does not use that much bandwidth over the course of a day or over the course of a month. So that moment when you want the bandwidth, it'll be there, but at other times you won't be using it and someone else will. So I think we're going to see the ultimate constellation of 42,000 satellites, and again, that could get bigger, but the ultimate constellation of 42,000 satellites will be able to serve 42 million people if it's 1,000 per satellite. And I think in the end it may go even higher than 1,000 per satellite, as the capacity of the satellites themselves may increase and the ability to manage the load to serve different users at different moments may increase. And that's how you could get to 100 million people using this, or more in the future. I don't think the limit is really 42,000 satellites. If each satellite is producing a substantial amount of revenue, then it makes sense to have more. What ends up happening is, with a large number of satellites serving a large number of people, with the cost being lower, this is another important feature of Starlink that I'll talk about later in this video. If you're able to make the cost of getting those satellites into orbit and getting the system up and running inexpensive, you're able to charge less per user or make more profit per user, which makes Starlink very competitive with existing internet providers, providing higher speed both up and down, and at the same time providing all of that at a lower cost or a competitive cost. And this is how Starlink will potentially make a lot of money.
One of the Muskism quotes is, "Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough." But my favorite quote, "I would like to die on Mars, just not on impact." General Thompson, Mr. Musk, over to you. Thank you. Welcome.
Elon talked very specifically about Starlink, and he gave away some key details that I think people will find interesting. First of all, he said that Starlink is being produced so fast, the Starlink satellites are being manufactured so quickly that they cannot launch them as quickly as they're making them.
The satellites are being produced at a rate now faster than we can launch them.
They're currently launching about 60 satellites every 2 weeks, maybe a little less than that, which would mean they're producing over 120 satellites a month. So that is a very impressive rate of production for the Starlink satellites. Another key detail that Elon mentioned in this talk is that the cost of each Starlink satellite is now less than the cost of launching that satellite to orbit, of the cost of transporting the satellite to orbit.
The cost of the satellite has dropped below the cost of transporting it to orbit. So even when taking a Falcon 9 in the most reused configuration, which is you get the booster back and you get the fairings back, the cost of transporting the satellite to orbit exceeds the cost of the satellite.
When you look at the cost of a Falcon 9 launch, which is what he was referring to, he specifically referred to a Falcon 9 launch with as much recovery as possible, where they recover the fairings as well as stage 1. They do lose stage 2. Stage 2 costs about $10 million. So they're losing $10 million on each launch. Then there's the cost of fuel, which is a ballpark of $500,000. There's the cost of everything else involved in the launch. So figure maybe it's $20 million a launch. When you divide that by 60 satellites, you get to around $300,000 per satellite cost of launch. So it appears that the Starlink satellites are costing $300,000 or less each, and it's likely that they're going to get that cost reduced.
The cost of that satellite will keep coming down as we ramp up rates and make design improvements.
Elon specifically mentioned that they need to get Starship up and running.
We really need Starship to carry Starlink in order to get the total delivered cost to orbit to be much better than it is today.
The purpose of that is twofold. One, with Spaceship up and running, they'll be able to launch more Starlink satellites at once. It seems likely that Starship could launch 400 Starlink satellites to orbit, where the current Falcon 9 launcher gets 60 of them into orbit. So getting 400 of them into orbit in one shot would be much better, obviously, in terms of speed. And then at the same time, the hope is that Starship will be fully reusable, which means they will get the cost of each launch down to, I believe Elon estimated $2 million, including fuel and everything for a Starship launch.
The cost of fuel and oxygen is about $100,000 per flight. So if the thing is fully reusable, it's about $900,000 per pound. And you should consider our operational costs, maybe it'll be like $10 million a flight.
So it would cost $2 million to get 400 Starlink satellites into orbit, the launch cost, which means you're getting the launch cost down to around $5,000 a satellite. If you can then bring the cost of those satellites down to $100,000 perhaps, which seems reasonable. Maybe it's $200,000, maybe it's $100,000, but you're getting the cost of getting that Starlink network into orbit much, much cheaper, which is dramatically increasing the ability to make a profit for SpaceX. It is also dramatically increasing their ability to lower the cost to end users, make it more competitive, and increase the number of subscribers. That means Starlink will be able to support millions and millions of users paying in the ballpark of $1,000 a year. If you get 10 million users paying $1,000 a year, that's $10 billion in revenue. And it may very well be that they're able to get 100 million users paying $1,000 a year, which would be $100 billion a year in revenue. Combine that with getting the cost of the Starlink network down, the capital expenditure in getting Starlink into orbit, keeping the operating costs down. You're talking about a tremendous amount of profit for SpaceX. It's going to become a tremendously valuable company. There was talk about at some point spinning off Starlink in an IPO, which would be a way of generating a lot of money for all the SpaceX employees who have stock, and it would generate cash flows to investors, while at the same time allowing SpaceX to focus on its mission of getting people to Mars. The other theory is that SpaceX just continues to own Starlink. It's not clear that Elon really wants to do an IPO. He doesn't like the idea of public companies. He likes keeping them private. But it does appear that that's a way of rewarding SpaceX employees and investors while allowing Elon to retain control of the SpaceX operation, which is getting people to Mars. And presumably SpaceX would continue to hold a substantial share of the Starlink operation, or Elon would continue to hold a substantial share, and that money could be used to fund going to Mars. Launching 3 million tons into space a year, getting enough there so that we can build a self-sustaining colony on Mars. Just to close, the most interesting thing in this is very simply the biggest news right now is that Elon related what the cost per Starlink satellite is relative to the cost of a Falcon 9 launch. talked about how one of the goals of Starship is to be using Starship to get Starlink into orbit, and how that, when you run the numbers, how much that saves, how much lower cost it becomes to get Starlink into orbit, to maintain Starlink's operational status, to keep Starlink's operational costs down, and make Starlink a going enterprise that generates a huge amount of revenue and a substantial amount of profit, making SpaceX a profitable company and using all of that to fund the eventual goal of a self-sustaining colony on Mars.